So it's been a considerable amount of time since Sonic Forces has been released, and since the internet is still using it as a punching bag, I figured a review is better late than never. Plus, it's the season of giving, so I figured what better way to celebrate than making a video and then crawling back under my desk to absorb copious amounts of anime for another 3 months or so. For those uninitiated, Sonic Forces released in early November to some reception. With the hype build up for the game, you can say there's been a bit of a backlash. Considering that I have 2 functional eyes and the analytical power to at least surpass that of a tiny child, Forces seem more like a lukewarm follow-up and not a full-blown AAA attempt to get the Hedgehog back on shelves. Now, before we get into the breakdown of the game, I'm sure most of you clicked on this video just to find out my general opinion. Is Sonic Forces any good? Well, yeah, it is. Ha! You thought I was gonna say it blows, but you're wrong! You suck at guessing! I already got your view! What are you gonna do about it, bitch? Alright, now that they're gone, I'm also not going to be completely nice to the game either, as what I found good seemed to equal what I found bad, or not so much bad as much as weird and confusing. So strap in for why I think Sonic Forces is alright, kind of. So someone at the writing staff for the Sonic game stories heard there wasn't enough mortal doom, super evil, non-explainable forces of nature in environments that were inexplicably on fire in recent Sonic games. As such, what Sonic Forces sports is a simple story made complicated because of reasons they had to stretch out, which is odd considering the game's short length. Dr. Eggman wants to take over the world again, except this time his MacGuffin of power, known as the Phantom Ruby, helps him create a being known as Infinite. Except Infinite is actually a mercenary of the Jackal Squad, which might be shocking if I wasn't already entertained by the fact that in the Sonic world exists an actual mercenary group of jackals who are just running around doing whatever they want. With the Phantom Ruby in tow, Infinite summons exorbitant power and illusions to conquer the planet, sending Sonic into action. Unfortunately, Infinite also brought back old enemies, half of which get boss fights and the other half forget their purpose in the game entirely, which then proceed to beat the living shit out of the Hedgehog. Sonic is taken out, Eggman conquers the actual literal world, and resistance is formed to stop him. Enter whatever abomination you decided to create, because in this game you get to create your own character to play in specifically fashioned stages. Here is where most of what either makes or breaks the game depending on who you ask, as there are now 3 different modes, 3 different perspectives, and 3 different playstyles that Forces offers. One is the modern Sonic from Unleashed in Generations, another putting your avatar character in the line of duty, and the last one being Classic Sonic. Oh yeah, Classic Sonic returns. No, don't worry, there's a perfectly good explanation. With all this, the story progression is simply silly and ridiculous, but the thing is, I don't care. A series about a bipedal blue hedgehog that spouts one-liners faster than the combined speed of all 4.5 hedgehogs in this universe shouldn't have the analytical story capacity that matches the lore of the entire Dark Souls series. Now, if it was a situation in which the campaign was plagued with super serious cutscenes of seriousness, it would be different. But outside of the intro, where everyone honestly believes that Sonic is actually for real dead, the game makes sure to keep things relatively light. The main baddie Infinite doesn't have much going on, other than giving everyone who hears him cuts in their ears from the sheer edge coming out of his mouth, and Eggman's ultimate plan seems strangely complicated considering the functionality of the Phantom Ruby is pretty confusing. But it's also important to note that it doesn't fluff out the story more than necessary, and as such, it never feels like time is being wasted. Just listen to this line.
I'm perfectly fine. It's been generations since I seen you. You okay?
You think the person who wrote that line gives a damn what you think? This is also the first Sonic game that contains full-length dialogue sequences for numerous characters, and I didn't want to jump off a bridge, so hey, extra points. The story serves its job, which is to have a silly little plot that thrives in its own cheese and is enjoyable as a result. Now let's get into that good old gameplay. As I said before, there's 3 different styles to indulge in when it comes to Sonic Forces, all of which have their advantages for completely different reasons. There is a 4th, but considering that it simply involves combining modern Sonic and the Avatar who fist bump all the enemies into the stratosphere, I don't find much reason to expand on it. Also, this is my last pass through on the script, so I'm just trying to wrap this shit up. And no, Shadow does not count as a 5th playstyle, stop interrupting me! Me? Now, the first thing to address is the overall length of the stages, and much like a lot of the criticism the game is facing, I will say they're very short. Although I will also say that the level design concerning modern and classic Sonic is some of the most varied I've seen out of this series, which is strange considering that Force's biggest hurdle before release was that it seemed too linear. But after playing enough to have collected every red ring, nailed every S rank, and collected enough avatar items to make whatever I goddamn please, I can say that I was surprised by the number of alternate paths and things to find in both styles of gameplay. The game also gets bonus points for having missions and putting the various collectibles in places that let you discover a new path. I'm not kidding, it wasn't until I started collecting the number rings in Network Terminal that I realized you can actually slip underneath these platforms to get a faster time. Now again, the overall short length of each stage does inhibit the game, but I'd rather have a 1 to 2 minute stage that has a lot to find over a 4-minute stage that is basically one path. Unleashed! With all the praise I'm giving the level design, you'd assume I'd give the gameplay a pass as a result. Well, here's where things get iffy. I won't say the controls are bad for modern and classic Sonic, but they both feel odd. Modern's 3D control is very stiff and reminiscent of Color's abominable 3D sections, although not quite as bad. And Classic somehow feels even weightier than in Generations. Both have awkward jump control and platforming sections, which lead to a lot of deaths just because you can never really feel the physics of their jumping. They're still mostly fun to play, especially the returning boost mania that is the modern Sonic stages, but I would be lying if I said that I didn't find each play session a bit odd. The perceptive 5 people who are still watching notice that I've neglected to mention the Avatar stages, and there's a reason for that, a simple one being that they aren't very good. The Avatar stages are mostly straightaways filled with enemies whose sole purpose is to get beaten to death with a lethal weapon given to you by Knuckles after your first meeting. The Wisps make their return, again, and this time their purpose is in the form of the Wispin, a weapon that manifests a different type of attack depending on what you choose. If you grab the corresponding Wisp in the stage, you can use it to discover hidden paths or nab a disgusting amount of rings. These stages are essentially modern Sonic without the boost, with a questionable gun, and with the most baffling and awkward control physics my fingers have ever been greeted with. Describing it as if you were on ice would sorely sell short the way this style plays, both in 3D and 2D sections. 3D more or less has you face planting into rails, and 2D makes sure all gaming sensibilities when it comes to jumping from one platform to the next are utterly shattered, with you ending up sitting in a corner while sucking a tube of yogurt dry for the next several hours. Part of the reason I use a bird character most of the time is not just because the design she has makes her cutie patootie, but also because the bird's double jump lets me cling onto life for just a bit longer. I mean, it's sort of fun to use different Wispins to find different stuff, and each animal has its own ability, making each animal sort of different. However, more often than not, I'm watching my avatar character collect enough rings to afford another death egg and then subsequently jumping into a bottomless pit. Stages like Guardian Rock can lick the pastiest parts of my sugary sweet butt cheek. On the plus side, with every action like beating a stage with an S rank or under a certain time, you get a substantial amount of avatar items to customize. Granted, about half the time you just get recolors of the same designs, but the sheer pile of things you can customize your avatar with is actually pretty cool. Some combinations look great, and the avatar items provide yet another reason to explore, nail a stage perfectly, or blaze through it under the time limit. There are certainly things to do to expand your playtime with the game, although with somewhat awkward modern and classic Sonic controls, and the truly magical experience that is the Avatar stages. The only other thing to note is that each playstyle even has their own musical stylings. Forces is also a hit or miss when it comes to the soundtrack, something practically unheard of when it comes to Sonic music, especially with Tomoya Ohtani at the helm. I adore the chiptune music of classic Sonic, have a guilty pleasure affection for the vocal tracks in the Avatar stages along with the main theme and Infinite's theme, but shockingly the weakest part to me is the modern Sonic music. Most of the bass tunes are fine, but the EDM additions are either just okay or butcher the song entirely. Lost Valley and Network Terminal when you're inside Chemical Plant are prime examples where the EDM is just obnoxious. All in all, I'm definitely gonna buy the soundtrack when it drops to sing Fist Bump at the top of my lungs while I drive down the road and scare small children, but not all of it is as catchy as I had hoped. The graphics also seem hit or miss, as stages like Metropolis and the city show off great lighting and spectacle, but other stages show the blocky environment design. The game does run at 60 FPS except for when Sonic is destroying everything in existence on Xbox One and PS4, but the Switch version runs at 30 FPS and may also be the reason for the shift from realistic designs to a more shaped and simple structured look. So when it comes to sights and sounds, Forces seems to be down the middle. Here's where the obligatory finishing statement would go if I didn't already spoil what I thought about Sonic Forces in the first minute of the video. Sonic Forces is definitely one of the weirdest additions to the Hedgehog's 3D lineup, with some awkward implementation of new gameplay styles and somewhat weird implementation of existing ones. But for about 40 bucks, I wasn't really expecting anything that would sweep me off my feet, and as such, I found Sonic Forces an odd but charming little game that I had a fun time playing. That is until I discovered the time limit missions and proceeded to realize slowly that one day we will all die. Jokes aside, I personally found Sonic Forces worth the time and money and would give it a recommendation to fans of Sonic just to see what it has to offer. It doesn't do much to innovate, nor is it really that impressive on a lot of fronts, but as far as smashing shit as fast as possible and jumping occasionally, I'd say it's worth admission.
We're like a well-oiled machine, fighting a well-oiled machine.
Yo, Sonic Forces me to tell you to like, comment, and subscribe. Boom, bitch. That's an ending. It's not. I would never tell you to do such a thing because I'm above that and you guys are above it. You can make your own decisions. You don't need me to tell you to like, comment, and subscribe. I will not tell you to do that because you're all adults. Unless you're not adults, which, why are you watching this? This is a very adult-themed video. I'm gonna talk about a hedgehog, but I say naughty words like fuck and shit.